Without further ado, I give you Tamara Kulish.
Thank you. Hi guys, I'm really happy to be here tonight. Amy gave me a wonderful introduction. My background started out with, I grew up in my mother's studio, and I would take 6 to 8 art classes a week, 2-hour art classes, in order to fill up the space, to make it look fuller. So as a result, I learned quite rapidly, and by the age of 15, I became a teacher's assistant in her studio. And soon after that, I was handling one studio by myself, teaching classes after school and on the weekends, while she handled 2 other studios. So this was our family business. I later became an illustrator and a graphic artist. I went into medical illustration, working at the Montreal General and Royal Victoria Hospitals in Montreal as a medical illustrator. We actually didn't do drawings of the internal body. It was mostly for doctors who had done research and, you know, being able to present their slides and all of their research. I've done drafting back in the day when it was all by hand, before computer. I've done fashion illustration, not for high-end companies like Oscar de la Renta or anything, but for mainstream clothing companies that would sell to Sears and other levels below Sears. So it was just kind of clothes for the everyday person. My first love for art brought me to doing hyper-realistic oil paintings. I've got a lot of my artwork up on Fine Art America, where you can see the oil paintings. If you Google me, you'll be able to see you know, my different settings. When my youngest granddaughter was re-diagnosed with cancer, I went to stay with my daughter in Missouri and help her out with the kids. I ended up moving in with her. My marriage failed during that time, and so I stayed with my daughter and my grandkids. At the time, she had a tiny little 2-bedroom townhouse that she was renting, and so there was absolutely no space for me to set up any of my oil painting things, so all of my art supplies stayed in boxes in the garage. But I still needed to find an outlet to create. You know, anybody who's woken up in the middle of the night with an inspiration, or they have to do it. I don't know if you can relate to that, but that's how my life has been, in that my art has not just been an outlet for expressing myself or because I want to do pretty pictures. It's been a form of art therapy for myself. I get inspiration sometimes in the weirdest moments and have to get up in the middle of the night and work on it. Otherwise I can't sleep. And then work on it for a couple of hours and then go back to bed. So I really needed to have something that I could work on that I didn't have to worry about the kids getting into. At the time, the twins were in kindergarten, and the little one who was going through cancer, well, she was just a little baby, but she could crawl around pretty quick, get into trouble if, you know, she was feeling better. So I started making a lot of the components for all of these pieces. And at the time, I did not know what I was going to do with these pieces. A lot of these collage pieces started out when I was in what I called my applesauce period, where I was so stressed out because of what was going on, that I could just glue pieces onto paper. Kind of like when people are old in an old age home and all they can do is just eat applesauce. I called it my applesauce period because that's all I could manage to do. I couldn't, I didn't have motivation to draw or paint. But I created a lot of these different collages. Some of these were created from scrap art papers that I had saved from my students. And you know how students are, they'll cut out a circle in the middle of a page and want to throw it away. Well, this was all good quality art paper. I had saved everything, so I ended up ripping it all up and putting it into Ziploc bags according by color. Color palettes. I had my oranges, I had my blues and greens and purples, and I ended up collaging a lot of these things and not knowing what I was going to do with it. I had put it all aside. Well, when I went to stay with my daughter, I was looking for things to do that I could just do something creative. And I wasn't trying to think specifically about doing something that I had already done. I wanted to do something different. When I was staying with her in Poplar Bluff, there was, like Amy has, a framing store, a nice high-end framing store, and the owner had let the art group that I was part of know that she had some mat fallouts to give away to artists who wanted to do some work. So I went and I picked up a box full, and I thought, I'm going to do something with this. So I started taking some of these, and some of these are just very random, but then when I started playing with them and layering them, and you can see some of the finished pieces here, I started realizing that I could take some of these collages that I had done and layer them to make something new and interesting. I did not know how to get them to stick together. I didn't want to use glue. I thought, that could be really messy. Any strong adhesive that would hold in place. I didn't feel that, that would necessarily be safe around the kids, and I didn't want them to get into it. So my whole focus on creating this really was something to be non-toxic around the kids. If they got into it, the worst that would happen would be stuff on the floor that I'd have to pick up. I wouldn't have to worry about them eating anything poisonous or smelling any fumes or anything like that. And particularly with the little one going through chemo, I didn't want to have to, endanger her health in any way. So it was quite by accident. I think a friend of mine, she was doing fabric art. She's a fiber artist, and I had found out that the way she mounts her work, she would use a push pin, and she would make large fabric panels, and then she would mount it on artboard or something like that, and she would use a push pin to push the hole through and use fishing line. But I did not necessarily start out with a plan. I was open to experimentation. I was open to learning about new ideas from different media. So if you have, let's say, a watercolor painting or a drawing that you don't like, what's to say that you can't rip it up, collage it out into something else, add some other pieces to it, and turn it into something else, transform it. Otherwise, what would you do with it? Throw it away? right? So the rejects can be fodder for experimentation. So I ended up getting, as you can see, a range of different thicknesses of the copper wire. This one here, the thinnest that I've got today, is a 24 gauge, and the thickest one is a 16 gauge. So this one is a little bit harder to bend, whereas this one is pretty skinny. So I could start off with taking, sometimes it doesn't want to just unroll nicely, so you just pull it around. I don't worry about measuring. Just start off with something random. When I start my pieces, I start with a spiral. I like the look of it, even though a lot of the ends don't necessarily show. I find it's a very good way to anchor my pieces, so I don't have to worry that they're going to pull out. If I'm going to start this one here, I like things that are asymmetrical. I don't necessarily like doing everything straight in the center. For me, doing everything straight in the center is more of a bullseye. I like things that are asymmetrical. I like to have some tight corners, and I like to have more loose space. I think it gives a much more interesting design when things are asymmetrical. I also like odd numbers. Odd numbers, whether you're doing flower arranging or other composition, odd numbers tend to give more dynamism to a drawing or a piece of work when you have an odd number of focal points as an even number. Even numbers tend to be very symmetrical, and that tends to end up being static. The black, I'm not necessarily counting as a piece because that tends to fade to the background. But there are three main layers. Or these three layers plus the embellishment, however you choose to look at it. When I start out, I'll just take the two top pieces and I'll try and just get a feel of where I want my wires to go. I'm thinking for this one, I'm going to have one of the spirals coming up there. And I'm just going to try and align my pieces so that they're as square as possible, even though the edges are very uneven. Watch your fingers so that you don't poke yourself. And I'm just pushing it through. I don't push it all the way to the artwork because otherwise if you push it all the way, there is a thin layer of wax and it will leave an indentation. So 2 layers is plenty for me to have to push through. All right, so I'm going to go there, across. Here I'm going to go down a bit. So I'll start off by mapping out my holes. I don't take out the push pins because this nicely keeps my layers together. Since I'm going to be starting out I'm going to have this spiral showing up on the top surface. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so that it's more visible. I'm not putting too many holes because I don't know how far my wire is going to go before I run out, and I don't want to end up with a lot of holes that I'm not going to use right at this moment. So this is my starting point. I'll just feed the wire through, and now I can decide where I want my spiral to go. I think I like the idea that the stem of it is going to go vertical, and then it goes into the little spiral. I'll hold this with my thumb, and the next push pin will be taken out. And just feed this up slowly. When you get to the end, you give a little push with your thumb that holds it nicely in place. Next push pin comes out. Now at this point, this would be a good point if I wanted to start adding some beads or some pearls to start embellishing it. I think for the first one, I'm not going to add anything. So I'm just going to put this through. You have to be careful because it does like to twist in a way and make nasty little hooks into itself. Don't worry about trying to get the wire perfectly straight. When it bends, it actually gives a little bit more of what they call a rustic finish, which gives more interest. If everything were perfect, it would look like it was made by a machine, and it would be more like Hobby Lobby art. It wouldn't be like an original piece of work. So don't be afraid of the imperfections. The imperfections, you can work with those. Many times in art we think that we have to get it perfect. And when it's not turning out perfect, we start to stress out. It's not working out, it's not perfect. But you know what? Sometimes your art starts to take on a life of its own, and sometimes then you need to just follow it. So if something starts to happen, we call those happy accidents, where things start to happen and you're like, oh, look at that, that's really cool. I didn't think that, would happen. So just go with it, don't fight it, just enjoy it. Here I've got a hole. I think I'm going to put another hole in here. And now I'm going to add and if your fingernail doesn't work, you can always use one of the tools just to smush it down a bit. I'm going to add one of these crystals, but I'm thinking I might add a couple of blue beads, one on each end, just to make that pop a little bit more.
Would you tell the people about the tools you have, because I recognize them, but maybe they need to know what some of them are?
These are...
It's a kit, isn't it?
Yes, it's a kit that you can buy for jewelry making. Mm-hmm. You've got the round needle nose pliers, which are very good for making the spirals or for anything that you don't want to have a sharp edge on. I've got the nice little wire cutting tool. This one here is very fine. It's for finer wires. You can actually ruin the edge if you try and use it for any of the thicker, heavier gauge wires. And for that, then I have a pair of workshop wire cutters. And I think I got those from my toolbox. So, let me see now. This pair of pliers is a small head plier, but it's got the flat edge to it. And it's also got a little bit of a tooling for teeth. So if you use it too tightly on your wire, it can leave marks. When that happens, I don't stress over it. I add more marks. I'll go around and add marks. Likewise, if I end up accidentally making dents or anything in the wire with this as I'm going, I'll go with it. I'll just add some more and make it look like it's supposed to be that way. I don't get stressed out about mistakes. I see it just as something that's just taking a little bit different of a direction, and I'll go with it and have fun. You know, it's like every piece is different. Every piece is unique. So I don't have to worry, oh, well, this piece isn't looking like that piece. Don't worry about it. This one here has got a flatter head on it. This is good for gripping. So, you know, depending on what you're doing, you'll just get a feel of the tools. I did not buy the most expensive set. It's, you know, this is like a little file, but it's also great for making holes and stuff. You improvise. This one here is...
It's called, I'm sorry, is it called a pick? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. This is a little scoop, but it's also got a little tweezer on the end. I think I mostly use it for the scoop. I don't have a lot of tools. Some people have lots and lots of tools. That's great, but I like things a little bit simpler. That way I don't have to keep track of so many things. So now, as I'm working, go back to this piece here. I'll pull this through very carefully. And then you can start to see that it's starting to, you know, take shape into something. I still have another length of wire that I can work with, so now I'm going to, I want to bring this wire back up to the surface because it's on the back side. Sometimes you have to wiggle it a little because the push pin pushes through one way, but then you catch the edge of the paper and it snags it. Alright, so now I'm at this point where I want to start thinking about how am I going to add an extra piece. Pushing it down through another piece is going to be very difficult to get everything to line up. So what I prefer to do is I'll bring it back up to the top. And now I will position this on here, I think that will look good. So now I want to go through another set of layers. This wire is going to come across the bottom and disappear down a hole. So I need to make that hole. And I'm going to push it through all the layers. Okay. And you don't have to worry about your wire lines being absolutely vertical or absolutely horizontal. They can have angles, they can do their own thing. And if it looks like it's crooked, you can even take your piece and you say, well, it's getting a bit crooked, so I'm going to exaggerate that a little bit and play with it. You see, so if you say, oh, it's crooked, okay, don't worry about it. Exaggerate it, work with it, let it do what it wants. So now I've got these pieces hanging together, but they're all floppy and loose. So this wire is pulled taut. Now I'm going to just make sure that these edges here look as though they're about at a right angle. Normally I have a ruler, which I forgot to bring. So I'm just going to eyeball it today. And that looks about square. Yeah. Okay. So now I want the wire to come back up. Now I'm only going to go through 2 thicknesses. And I'm going to pop it through here. And I'm going to put a push pin on the other side. And it got a little crooked when I was pushing that first one through, so I'm just realigning it up. Now I'm going to push this one through. And I try not to let that push pin go all the way to my artwork because it will leave a little mark, the roundness of the push pin. So now this is holding in place. I think I'm going to add a couple more push pins to just secure it a little bit more. I will add more holes as I go along. But these now are going to hold those pieces in place. And here we go. So this wire is closest to this push pin, so that's where it's going to come up. The rabbit comes up the hole. There. And it's not long enough to make it to any of the other push pins, so I'm going to finish it off. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just give a short little distance down and another one to bring it up. So as you can see, I'm creating my artwork as I go along. I'm just seeing what's working out, how it's shaping up. So I've got one little piece here, and I'm going to bring this piece back up. And it's getting too small to pull with my fingers, so I'm going to give it a pull. Now I'm going to finish it off with a spiral. Now I've run out of wire, so I've cut another piece of wire, just a random length. I don't measure. I think that's what makes it more interesting, is the not measuring, because then you're forced into creating on the spot. Otherwise, you're creating by recipe or something pre-planned. I think there's a place for that, you know, if you're going to measure and pre-plan, I think there's definitely a place for it. Like in carpentry, there's a lot of precision that's involved, but something like this, where it's more free form, not measuring, I think is the key. So again, I'm just creating a spiral to start out with, and I had finished off with a small spiral. You know, rather than just having raw wires. In the beginning, what I was doing was I was bringing the wires to the back and trying to finish them off in the back. And I thought, well, you know what? Why don't I use the ends of it as part of the design? I think that would be much more interesting. So this has kind of evolved as I've worked with it. And as I discover more materials and I play with different things, then it just evolves. It's very relaxing to do something like this, because I'm not having to pre-plan, I'm not having to go according to, you know, like if you do a knitting or a crochet, you're having to follow a pattern. I'm not following a pattern, so it's something that's just very free form. It's very relaxing. There's no right and wrong. Nobody's going to tell you it shouldn't be this way. I did a piece that sold, and the collector, she bought 3 of my pieces, and she said, "Oh, this is unique. This is fresh." And I had found a piece of road tar on the road. A piece of road tar with still the paint from the striping on the road. And I thought, oh, I'm going to do something with this. And, you know, of course, people are thinking, this is a crazy lady picking up road tar, you know, because I'll just find random things. But what I did was I wrapped the copper wire around it. And then I did some of the spirals, and I added some crystals and some of the pearls to it. And I put it down on a beautiful kind of a linen artboard. And all of a sudden, this piece of road tar looked sculptural. This piece of garbage that you'd walk by and you wouldn't think anything else of, it turned into a sculpture. So, you know, you can create with anything. It's just really inspiring. Things that people throw away that, you know, you can upcycle, you can use. You don't have to spend a ton of money on art supplies. You can get very creative. You can use what you have. Go to the hardware store, buy stuff. You don't have to go to, you know, spend the most expensive, buy the most expensive things. So it turns out that this kind of thing is very relaxing, very rewarding.
Are all of your pieces a small size like that?
I was working smaller sizes on account of the space that I had. Being in that small townhouse that my daughter was renting, I carved out a space in the garage for myself to work, and it was not a heated or air-conditioned garage, and so only on good days could I work there. So I had just a little work table where I could do some of these things and get messy. Other than that, I was working in my easy chair. It was such a small space that we didn't even have a kitchen table or dining room chairs or anything. We had a little kids table for the kids to eat at, but the grown-ups, we sat with our meals on our laps. And I would sit in my easy chair. So whatever I would do for my art, it either had to be in my easy chair or in the garage, in my little space. So, yes, so a lot of the pieces that I did were small. I'm not currently in a large space right now either, so, you know, working on large canvases or large pieces is a little out of the question. But when you're looking at some of these leftovers, some of these leftover pieces are pretty small, you know, odd shapes. You know, so you take your X-Acto and your steel ruler and cut them down into other shapes that you can use. I think that you could go larger. I haven't experimented yet with too large with this media. I have in mind some things I'd like to do, but that will only happen when I have the space to do it. So.
They also make a small hobby drill press, and it's about maybe as tall as your metal thermos cup there. And it takes a little drill bit, it'll sit on the top of your desk or whatever you want to lock it down to. And you can put these little drill bits in there and you can press as many holes as you want. And they're not as much as the big ones, I know that. So.
Huh.
Mm-hmm.
I did not know about that. This guy is going
I don't know how much they are, though. I know they're not as much as the big ones, I know that.
So it's just like at the...
Yeah, you just have to look up drill presses and hobby drill press or mini drill press, and you'll see what they have.
Huh. Well, that might be interesting if I was going to work on some bigger pieces. So now I'm just going to start finishing up with some of these longer.
Now all the little gems or whatever you buy have pre-holes in them, so like the one gem you put on already has a hole in it, correct?
Yes. These I had bought for beading.
Okay.
So they're not just tumbled stones, but the crystals are all pre-drilled, so they're made for stringing. The beads, of course, have holes in. The semi-precious stones and the shells and everything were all, I had purchased them by the strand at the Tucson Gem Show. But you can also buy things at Michael's and Hobby Lobby have a selection. You can buy things on sale. I think that around St. Louis that there is a gem show once a year.
Yeah.
I think that we've just missed it,
I
if
think
I'm
it's
not
at District
mistaken.
9. I think District 9 does that.
You can get those at a material shop too. There's a big one down at Mid Rivers Mall, which is Sally's or something like that.
Oh, okay. And sometimes there's rockhound stores or beading stores that, you know, you can buy those things from. So there's all kind of places, you know, to find your inspiration.
The main reason I mentioned that press for you is because if you had another piece, you were talking about bigger press pieces, and you needed to punch a hole through it, of course the drill bit and the press would drill the hole through whatever you wanted to do with it, and then you can
That's true. This one here, I think I'm going to go through a couple layers. We're finishing up now. So now I'm just going to decide, I think I want that feel to it. So it's very asymmetrical.
Is your copper going to go through all the way through that? Is that what's going to,
Yes.
you're going to hold that brown piece onto that black piece by the copper?
Well, right now I'm just holding it with my thumb.
No, I know, but what are you going to do?
Oh, I've got a hole already. I had put a hole here through the
Yeah.
2 layers, and then I realized, you know what, I think I want to go through 3 layers, so I took my piece out, and all I'm going to do is just approximately line it up, hold it in place with my thumb, and now I just have to punch through 1 more layer.
But the copper is gonna hold it together. You're not gonna
Yes.
glue it on there or something
There's
like
no
that.
glue.
Okay.
There's no
I just
glue.
wanna know
It's
how
the-
you're holding it together.
Right, the copper wire is going to hold
Okay.
everything together. So now I've got, on each layer, I have to make sure that I have enough points, enough holes and enough points that I'm holding each piece securely, that it's not going to wobble or become crooked. But once I see that I've got enough holes with the wire, because I'm threading it up and down, and then I'm flattening. As I go, I'm flattening it so that it's not going to, it's not like a thread or an embroidery floss or anything like that, that it would slip back through. Once you bend it, it's going to hold, it's going to stay. It's going to take quite a force to pull it apart. All right, so now I'm just going to get this one lined up. Now that I've got that first piece in, now I can look at aligning my edges so that things are not crooked. And then I'll just put in more push pins. And at this point now, I'm not going through all 4 layers. I'm only going through these 2 layers. So again, it's not so hard on the hands. Just making sure that I didn't get out of alignment. There's only 2 push pins holding it, so it's still, I can wiggle it a little. And at this point, I'm just going to add a couple more push pins just to secure it. And these push pins are what's holding it in place so that it doesn't get out of alignment. So it's, you know, as you can see, it's not going to fall off. Now I've got this piece of wire. I'm going to thread it through and pull that taut, and then just with my finger, just bend it a bit. Now it's not going to slip back. Okay, it's not like thread that it's going to slip back. It's very obedient. I've got a good tail on it yet, so I'm going to pull out the push pin that's closest to it and bring this up, pull it taut. This will reach to the other one, but then I'm going to be finishing off the end very soon. I could probably put in another hole here and bring that tail up in the middle, and that way I'll have enough wire. That way I'll have enough wire to do a spiral with, because if I bring it down all the way to the end, I'll be left with a very little piece, and the spiral will be very small. It won't look good, so it'll probably be better just to tuck it behind. So this way I can use the wire as part of the design piece. And so as you see, I'm not worried about pre-planning, but when you work with something that's asymmetrical, you can add different elements into it, and it gives a feeling of movement to the piece. So now at this point, I'm just going to finish off with a spiral. sometimes what I do is I'll put square edges on my spiral rather than trying to get it perfectly smooth. And that gives a little bit of interest as well. Here I'm going to decide, it looks a little strange just having it going at that angle, so I can actually, it's wire, so it's pliable. You can change the angle. If I wanted it to twist the other way, I could twist it around the other way. And I can still do that later. Once I finish more of the piece, I can decide, well, you know what, I'm not really happy with the way this one is going, so I can twist it so it goes in the other direction. Before I had the spiral going up and swirling around, I've just flipped it, so now it's horizontal. So it's a very pliable medium. It's very forgiving. You can have a lot of fun with it. I've got, I have a couple of larger pieces that I did not bring today. I had found, just on my walks, some interesting nodules of branches. You know the knots on the trees, how sometimes they're very interesting. Well, in a storm, sometimes you find them lying on the ground, and so I pick them up, and I found that by painting them with some copper paint, it would give it a whole different look to it. And then I could take those pieces once they were dry, and then I could wire them onto the artboards. And so you don't have to do these kind of collages. You don't have to do that. You can do something completely different. You don't have to work with gemstones or beads if that's not your thing. Amy has a lovely supply of fallouts. I have some here. If anybody would like to grab some, take some home just to experiment and try. These are for giveaway. These are for giveaway. In the bag is for giveaway as well. Just take as much as you want. You can have fun with it, and show Amy your designs and your finished products. And maybe there would be an evening where people could bring in their pieces and I could take a peek, where you could show me photos.
Yeah.
Well, the cutouts are just, if you cut your own mat boards, you probably I got a lot of those.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're just the
That's
fallouts.
something to do with.
Yes. So it's a way of using scraps, things that would otherwise go to the trash heap. I love the concept of recycle, upcycle, renew things, take things that are scrap or garbage, like that piece of road tar, and transform it. I'm calling that whole series of work, in my mind, it's the from rejection to redemption. So it's things that are rejected by other people or by our society, and redeeming them, bringing them up to a different value, and turning them into sculptural pieces. So,
Tamara, have you ever tried, and I don't know if it'd hold up or not, I'm sure it'd be easy with a push pen, a maple leaf, painting it and then putting that wax on it, edging it in the gold, and then trying to use that as one of the layers?
no, but you've given me some ideas.
I'm wondering if that would hold up. I don't see why it wouldn't if you...
It's organic.
Deteriorating.
It's an organic matter, so normally it would deteriorate, but by dipping it in the encaustic, that would help to preserve it, because once you dip it in the encaustic, it seals it from the oxygen, and once it's sealed from oxygen, then it won't deteriorate. And I love
Where
doing pressed
would you
leaves.
buy this, whatever it is you're talking?
Encaustic,
Yeah, how do you spell it even?
ENCAUSTIC.
Okay, does it come in a bottle?
Encaustic. No, I made my own. I researched it on YouTube, and I found some YouTube videos on how to work with encaustic and how to create your own encaustic. Different artists will, it's a ratio of anywhere from, I believe, 6 parts beeswax to 1 part damar. Anywhere from 6 to 1 to 9 to 1. Some artists, if you go with more beeswax in your ratio, your finished product will be softer. It'll have a lower melt point. If you go with a higher ratio of damar, your finished product will be harder, but it can also be more brittle. So you have to be careful. Yes, ma'am. Time to wrap up? All right.
Do you,
I know.
what do you call your frames? Are those shadow boxes?
Yeah.
Those are shadow box frames.
Okay.
Yes, because a regular frame
Yeah, I know,
didn't
you got a
accommodate
big
it.
fat folder.
Yes, yes, in order to accommodate the depth of
Yeah,
the
I just
material.
wanted to know.
Right.
Oh, and the answer on the leaves, I've seen guys, what they do, take a leaf and spray paint it, and then use it. The other way is they'll take it, go buy the material, at Hobby Lobby, it's silver, gold, whatever, turn the material on the backside, take the leaf and draw it on the backside, then cut it out, and turn it over, then you got the gold leaf or silver leaf, and then you do it that way.
So if you have
Interesting.
one,
Do that
Turn-
with chocolate.
Yeah, you can turn.
one
just
thing
turn
you
it
want
over,
the
just turn
artist to
paper
leave
over.
with tonight as far as like a final thought, what would it be? Like the most important part of your
The-
style of artwork?
The final thought is have fun with it.
Don't tell us never throw anything away.
Follow your
Because that's what we never do now.
follow your gut, I think, in that a lot of times your gut will tell you, yes, I need this, or no, I don't need that. Follow your gut. Follow your joy. Don't feel that you need to limit yourself. Be open to exploring. What I'm doing, this is something that I've created. It started out as a necessity to be able to create in a small space and to do things with material that I had on hand that would be non-toxic for the kids. But this could also be a springboard for you guys. You don't have to do exactly what I'm doing. You can springboard off into other things. You can do the spray painted leaves and drill stuff. I mean, like there's just so many ways of being able to go with it. Look around. I always found that some of the found objects that I incorporate into it, whether it's a rusted washer or a piece of road tar or a piece of wood that I paint with a copper paint. And to answer your question, it's I use acrylic paints. They're the metallic paints.
Really?
Yes.
I
like
got a lot
the
of gold and silver, but I don't know what they are.
I've never seen the technique. I'm just curious, are there other people who use tie-down copper wire that you're aware of?
I'm not aware of it.
Nor am I.
I haven't heard of it. It's just something that I
So that's the adhesive versus adhesive.
That's instead of adhesive, instead of glue, instead of using Gorilla Glue or
That's gonna
something
last
like that.
forever. No matter what the conditions,
Right.
humidity or the heat, that'll last forever.
Exactly. It's not going to move. It becomes archival because all of the paper pieces have been immersed in encaustic. They're not going to yellow, so that becomes archival, which is interesting for collectors. These are all art boards, and those are non-acid, as Amy will tell you. They're all good quality. So, you know, when you're working with those things, I think that you're going to create some pieces that will bring you joy as you're doing it. It enhances your walks. When you go out for a walk, you know, and you see things, you'll see things in a new way. You can find things. I mean, crushed bottle caps or cans or anything. You know, what if you were to drill through those and create some collages and put those on artboard? And if you wanted to gild the edges, I mean, the world. There's a world of possibilities. You don't have to limit yourself.
I think in everything that I've taken from this is that you have shown us a mistake is not a mistake. It's a door opening for more creativity.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
And I think you should write a book.
Another book.
Another book.
Well, okay, well, I
Another
didn't
book.
know that you're already an author, but I can see that there's quite a bit of information that really should be spread.
Thank you, thank you.
So if you were going to sell that piece you did tonight, do you have a price in mind?
This size piece in the gallery is selling for, what did I say?
2 1/4.
2 1/4, 225 for about this size. And that's the price that the Compagnie is selling them for. So, but tonight, if anybody fell in love with anything, I will accept any reasonable offer.
Very pretty.
They are beautiful.
So if somebody wants to see more of your work online, where would they find that at?
You have a card?
Do you have a card?
I do have a card, but it's my personal phone number and my,
Yeah, we're not going to put that on YouTube.
I'm
Yeah.
just interested in that email that you gave, that you suggested.
I
Your name.
have three websites that I can share with you if you want.
And we'll
to-
post the
Absolutely.
link in the credits then.
Okay,
Can you-
so one of them is my author website on Amazon. There's the Fine Art America website where I have, not these artwork up for sale, but some other artwork, and my blog.
So what would be an easy website to look at your stuff plus?
And you
maybe
can see her
connect
work.
with you and ask some questions or.
You can, if you go to my blog, there is a contact me page.
How can we do that?
You can also see her work in person at Missouri Artists on Main in St.
Yes.
Charles.
Yes, Missouri Artists on Main.
You are a resident artist there.
Until May, I will be at Missouri Artists on Main. My contract expires in May, and then I will be exclusively with the Compagnie Gallery on Del Mar, on the Del Mar Loop. The gallery owner there has expressed to me that she would prefer that I'm exclusive with her. So I'm going to just let my contract with Missouri Artists on Main run out, just, you know, and then I'll be just.
Well, let's give a huge round of applause to Tamara. Focused in North St. Louis County, Northside Art Association is a nonprofit 501c3 arts organization that serves local artists through community exposure, networking, education, and peer interaction. Learn more about Northside Art Association at www.northsideartassociation.org.